Welcome to Eye on Horror, the official podcast of iHorror.com. This is episode 57, otherwise known as season 3, episode 21, otherwise known as our season 3 season finale. I am your host, James J. Edwards, and with me yet again, as always, till the end of time, your other host, Jacob Davison. How you doing, Jacob?
Doing good, but it is chilly as hell out. So I'm recording like under a layer of blankets.
It's really kind of frigid. I think we all have our Cavity Colors joggers on.
That is true. I'm wearing my Friday 13th Part 4 joggers.
I got the Trick or Treat one.
Trick or treat for me too.
Also with us, who's jumping the gun again, but that's okay. Your other host, John Correa. How you doing, Korea?
You're gonna start talking about cavity colored joggers, and you're not gonna expect me to jump in. I started this whole thing of all of us wearing these joggers, okay? And yes, they are comfy. Please sponsor us because we love your joggers so much.
If you find a secret stash of the Mars Attacks ones, I'm an extra large. Anyway, we're gonna jump right into it because we have a lot to talk about today. Because with our season finale, we are gonna do our top 10 of the year.
Top 10.
Top 10.
Top 10.
Oh, actually, before we get into it, we have to say, last week we thought that we invented the dad pod.
Dad pod.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you actually look? Because I did.
There's like
5. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a ton. Some of them are
none have to do with movies.
No. Some are fitness podcasts. Some are just on fatherhood, all this stuff. But yeah, it was naive of us to think we invented that. If any of you dad pods are listening, and you want to do a movie episode, let's crossbreed. We'll be on your pod.
Interesting way of putting it.
I don't think that's the right word. I don't think
pollinate
crossover special. It'll be like those DC Universe episodes where everything crosses over.
Or when the Flintstones meet the Jetsons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or Freddy versus Jason.
Let's hop into this. I believe the way we do it is going alphabetical by last name in a circle. So Let's start with C is for Korea. That's good enough for me. Let's start with you.
Well, let's also remind everyone, these are our personal top 10s.
Yes.
These are just the top 10 movies that we have seen personally throughout the year. This does not necessarily mean anything critical. This is just personal favorites. Not all of us we haven't seen every movie that came out this year. And opinions differ. So if
he's already setting you up for arguing with me about my number 4.
And we're not going to argue today. Everything's all about the positivity. So if one of your favorite movies isn't in our top 10s, let us know. We'd love to hear it. We're definitely going to be giving shout outs in other ways to movies that we couldn't include in here. So, with that said, my number 10 is, Come to Daddy, starring Elijah Wood. That movie just came out of nowhere, and in a lot of ways, like not only in just where suddenly it's like, wait, there's a movie starring Elijah Wood called Come to Daddy. That sounds so. Why does he have a weird mustache? And like, but the movie lives up to that. There's so many little moments in it that just come out of nowhere, and it just gets so weird. But it does this really good job of having you sit in the moment during these really weird moments, and then when it gets like violent or anything, it just lets it pass. Like you don't sit there and dwell in the aftermath. You don't sit there in it, but it makes you sit there during like uncomfortable conversations. And it's a very weird, uncomfortable, and very different movie than what I've seen come out recently. So yeah, I had to give my first spot to Come to Daddy. Also, great title.
Cool. Jacob, what do you got for number 10?
Well, I just decided to go with a recent Shudder release and one of my favorite anthologies this year, the Mortuary Collection.
Yes.
Yeah, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's like kind of a Tales from the Crypt. I'm talking original Amicus Tales from the Crypt type of movie where Clancy Brown plays this really creepy but really affable and charismatic mortician who's telling these stories about how these various people in his mortuary died to this woman who's visiting. And it takes a lot of twists and turns that I wasn't really expecting it to. And it just has some brilliant special effects for because there's a lot of crazy stuff. Like there's monsters, there's killers, there's a lot of gore. So it was just a ride because like I just didn't really know what to expect to happen next.
And it gets the ultimate anthology approval in that every story is solid. Like even like the ones that don't absolutely blow you away, they're still extremely solid. So like, and that's rare. Usually it's hit or miss, but these are all like I wasn't sitting there going, oh, when's the next one going to start at all during it. So bravo.
My number 10 is from my saviors this pandemic, IFC Midnight, The Rental. This is the Dave Franco directed movie about the people who go to a cabin and weird shit happens. We talked about it when it came out. I think this has the strongest ensemble of the year with Dan Stevens, your man crush, Alison Brie, and also Sheila Vand, who is the girl walks home at midnight, or that from that movie. I always mess up the title.
The girl walks home alone.
A girl walks home alone at night. Is that what it is? Something like that.
I believe so.
There's some kind of at midnight or at night. Anyway, that Iranian vampire movie that actually isn't Iranian. I think it's American, but it pretends to be Iranian. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about The Rental. See The Rental. It's kind of like home invasion slasher, but it's really clever, really awesome.
Genuinely creepy, that movie. And you get to see Dan Stevens shirtless, so that's worth the price of admission.
All right. And with that, Korea, number 9.
Number 9, it's shirtless Dan Stevens all the way. Not any movie, just Dan Stevens shirtless. My number 9, a lot of people gave this one a lot of flack, but I absolutely love Train to Busan Presents Peninsula. I really love what that film does for the franchise because it takes place not only in a completely different timeline of the series of events. It takes place 4 years after the first one and follows different people. But I like that it opens up this whole world of possibility of where this franchise goes. Like it almost feels like you could almost do a Train to Busan Presents movie every year. And I want to see them all. This one, while it didn't focus on the drama as much as the first movie did, there were still some really good gut punching moments. But also the action was just there, dude. There was like so many good high energy moments. There was like part of action. Like there's a whole bit where it felt like a Fast and Furious movie, but with an RC car. it was bonkers sometimes. And of course, you can't deny that the King Rat zombie scene was not like just one of the coolest moments of the year. Like I absolutely loved it. So I don't understand the flack. I loved it. Yeah. That's my number 9, Peninsula.
My number 9 was Spree. With Joe Keery, Steve Harrington, with him basically going like social media American Psycho. This one didn't get a lot of attention, but I feel like it should have because it's basically about this dude who's driving this kind of Lyft style app, but he wants to be famous. And he wants to be famous by killing people. So it's kind of a found footage thing where he's killing his passengers and he becomes obsessed with a comedian played by Sashir Zamata. And also one of the best parts is that David Arquette plays his deadbeat DJ dad. And so they have some pretty great scenes together. It's got kind of an American Psycho Joker, kind of falling down type of style to it. And as with those movies were relevant to their times, this one is painfully relevant to today.
My number 9, and this is the first time we're going to talk about it, but not the last. I'm the first one to have Underwater on my list.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm sure it's higher on their list. I'm sure it's on all of our lists. Underwater to me was just, it was one of the last movies before the whole pandemic hit. So I did get to see it in a theater, and that's the best way to do it. It's like we've talked ad nauseum about Underwater, but it's basically a disaster movie that, it's got you on the edge of your seats before the monsters even show up. It's just so incredibly well done. It's that's where we're leaving now because we'll be talking about it again later on. What's your number 8, Korea?
Number 8? Oh man. Number 8, I got to give it to Sputnik. Sputnik, absolutely. It came out of nowhere. Like suddenly it was just like, oh yeah, here's this Russian movie that's basically like, if it's basically like, oh yeah, what if, Alien 3, the original concept for it actually happened, and it happened with the Russians. So like, it's really cool. Like it's about an alien coming to Earth and just shit going bad, and it was a lot of fun. It's definitely one of those ones where I think one of the reasons why it is so low on my list is it's been so long since I've seen it, because that was like beginning of pandemic for me, so like I need to rewatch it again. But yeah, Sputnik was definitely one of my favorite creature features of the year. I loved it.
Cool. Jacob?
Okay, my number 8 and one of a couple Beyond Fest entries on my list, The Wolf of Snow Hollow. Like this one was just was very entertaining and just very enthralling, because it's like it does feel like, a lot of people described it as much, but it does feel like a Coen Brothers werewolf movie, because it's about this small skiing town where like nothing ever happens, but somebody's picking off tourists one by one, and it happens on the night of the full moon, and it's up to this deputy sheriff, who's actually played by the director and writer Jim Cummings. So like, he was very Renaissance man on it, but he pulled off a really good job. And it has an amazing cast, like Ricky Lindholm plays a detective, and they have a lot of good chemistry. But real big highlight is Robert Forster, the late great Robert Forster, plays the sheriff, who's also Jim Cummings' character's dad, and this was his last movie before he passed away, so it was a great send-off. And I saw this at the drive-in for Beyond Fest, so it was very emotional, and like when his name came up, people honked in his honor. And yeah, just it was as funny as it was scary, so it was a really great horror comedy balance. I loved it.
My number 8 is another one that we're going to be hearing about again later. It's lower on my list than I'm sure it's on both your lists though. Possessor Uncut.
Yeah.
And Possessor Uncut is Brandon Cronenberg basically doing David Cronenberg. He's kind of picking up where his dad left off when his dad started making these Oscar bait movies like, A History of Violence and Eastern Promises. Brandon Cronenberg's like, oh, nah, let's keep making these gory, gooey, splattery movies. And that's what he did. It's Possessor Uncut that's my number 8. Korea, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is not on either of your guys' list. I know this. My number 7 is one of my favorite movies to come out during the pandemic, and that's the Boulet Brothers Dragula Resurrection. For those who don't know, Dragula is a drag competition show that focuses on the 3 fundamentals of Dragula, which is horror, filth, and glamour. And when the pandemic happened, they decided to do a feature-length special where they brought back 7 competitors from the first 3 seasons to compete for a shot to come back for season 4. These were all ones that didn't win. They might have dropped at various points. What was cool is they shot the whole thing early in the pandemic, and they had the different competitors do all their looks and everything at their homes. So they sent out like a crew and filmed with them, and it was really awesome because it wasn't just a competition, because it always goes off. Their competitions are great. Their looks are always fierce, and they always do killer jobs. And they really picked like a nice group of diverse competitors throughout the seasons. But Resurrection does a really good job of also getting into these people's lives, seeing where they've gone and changed since then. And also they address a lot of stuff like Black Lives Matters. And then one of the competitors, Priscilla, she actually transitioned since season 3, the most recent season. She talks a lot about that. She talks a lot about the violence towards Black women who are trans as well. And it was so phenomenally done, and it was insane just that they were able to pull it off, that they were able to safely make like a feature competition show when everything was shot down. When they shot this thing, like no productions were going, so it was insane that they were able to pull it off and still make like a good product. So yeah, I have to give big ups to the Boulets for their hard work on that one.
Go, Jacob, what's your number 7?
All right, my number 7 is The Invisible Man by Lee Winnell.
Ooh, yeah.
I feel like most of the horror movies I actually saw in theaters are going to make this list because most of them were pretty fun experiences. But this is how you do a remake. Like I remember when we talked about it around when it first came out, and we did do some jabs at the Dark Universe attempts at remaking, but like this is how you update a Universal monster movie, because it's Elizabeth Moss plays this woman who's married to this tech billionaire guy is like super possessive and abusive, and she escapes, so he kills himself. And it all seems like it's going well, except maybe he's not dead. And somebody is like gaslighting her and like screwing up her life one point at a time. And she's seeing like movements when nobody's there. So, like it's just one of those kind of accelerated worst case scenario stories. Like what's worse than having an abusive ex, an invisible abusive ex, maybe. And it just had some of the most intense scenes in a horror movie this year. Like
it has the most holy shit moment of the whole year. And anyone who's seen it knows what moment I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. I already know which one you're talking about. And I can remember the audible gasps that rained from the audience when that happened, including myself.
Yeah, that was one of the best like audience screenings I've ever been to. Like everyone was just in it. So
like even just the scene where like she's cooking some bacon and eggs, and then everybody else leaves, and then it focuses on the bacon and eggs, and something causes the heat to go up until it catches fire, and just like all the and gas and oohs and ahs from the audience, because they just feel that tension building. That was a masterclass in tension building.
Yeah, Lee Winnell's for real.
Oh, he is for real.
My number 7, speaking of movies that take advantage of the pandemic situation, and also speaking not of audience experiences, is Host. This is the movie that defines this whole pandemic, because it's completely shot over Zoom, and it still shows that even over Zoom, people can be really stupid in horror movies, but it is so much fun and so effective. And I just love the fact that, like you were saying, that with Dragula, that they were able to make this movie during the pandemic. I love the fact that Host was able to, basically the director got his friends together who all happened to be good actors. That helped him. And he just made a freaking movie over Zoom, and it's good.
And I especially love that, like, they didn't overstay their welcome, like the movie ended like the amount of time, like how the length of it is perfect for the concept and for what it was. Like if it was any longer, it would have been a drag. Like it got in, it didn't let up. And and it's also the most appropriate movie to watch on your phone or laptop, since Unsane.
You actually have to watch it on a laptop. If you try to watch it on a bigger screen, you'll lose
not
it.
It's effective. Watch it on a laptop in your bed, covers over you in the laptop.
Lights off. Yeah. Korea, we're on to number 6.
Number 6, this might come off as a bit biased because we had the writer and director on, but I fucking loved Spontaneous. And, people are going to argue that it's not horror. That has some of the most horrifying moments of any movie this year. Spontaneous was such a well-made, like, little love story. It felt real. It felt organic. But it just kept having all these terrifying moments. If you don't know, Spontaneous is a high school love story, but the issue in their town is that kids keep randomly or spontaneously exploding. And when they do, it is goopy as fuck. And it just was really good.
Go back and listen to our episode with director Brian Duffield about if you want to know more about the goop, because he goes into detail about how they did that, and it sounds like a really fun shoot.
Yeah, it sounds like it would have been a bitch to clean up. That's for sure.
Not fun for the PAs, but for the cast, and
I'm sure Locations was having a shit fit. But no, I love Spontaneous a lot, and that was one I definitely revisited, and it's still effective after repeated viewings. Just so many of these moments of the kids running through the hallways, especially with my generation, the millennials and stuff, growing up with Columbine and all the school shootings and everything. It felt very real, that terror coming through. There were it hit hard in many different ways. So that was a very effective horror movie. Spontaneous.
Jacob?
All right. I've got another anthology on my top 10 list because anthologies rule, especially this one. It's What Happens Next Will Scare You, which technically hasn't been publicly released, although it was available to watch at a few film festivals this year. Like, I actually watched it, I think, at 3 different festivals because it was that good. But the setup is a clickbait website is having a big office meeting on Halloween because they need a bunch of scary articles and links to post in order to get more clicks. So this entire team has put together a compilation of different found footage or websites or other weird stuff they found on the internet. And it makes for some very interesting content for an anthology. This is also from Chris LaMartina and Jimmy George of the WNUF Halloween special, which actually is connected a little bit, so it can be kind of seen as a sequel. And in a lot of ways, I kind of like this one more. Like, it had some particularly scary segments and some funny bits. My personal favorite being a 911 call from a mortuary where a mortician is like screaming about the dead people in his mortuary coming to life. And I feel like I really liked it because I was kind of at the forefront of creepypasta when that first started, like scary stories you find on the internet, the modern day urban legends. So this just kind of feels like a movie compilation of that. And you get a little bit of everything. There's killer clowns. There's Bigfoot. I know you'd be happy about that one particularly, John.
James is the resident Bigfoot enthusiast.
All right. Well, we're all big fans of Bigfoot on iHorror.
Of course. Support your local Sasquatch.
You gotta.
My number 6 is a movie that kind of popped up to Netflix. It played on the festivals last year. Finally, the rest of us get to see it. The Platform.
Yeah.
And The Platform is one of those dirty movies that it's a pretty thin metaphor for basically the class struggle. But it's basically the short synopsis is it's about a prison where there's a bunch of different levels and they send a platform of food down and it stops at each level. And so the people at the top get to eat and then it'll go down, after amount of time it goes down. So by the time it reaches the people at the bottom, there's barely anything left. And the catch is every month the levels change. So you might be on top one month and then you're on the bottom the next. So, which that doesn't really happen so much in real life class struggles, but it's a pretty brilliant analogy for desperation and, what people will do to eat, I guess.
It is the opposite of subtle. With its metaphors.
No, there's nothing subtle about it. And okay, so we're at the halfway point. Each of us have done 5. And so far, have there been any duplicates?
No.
Not yet. Now, I know there are going to be because,
of course,
into the second half, I know that there are going to be because I've already heard some. But yeah, this is a pretty diverse list we got. Korea, what's your number 5?
I'm glad we're not just all rooting for the same things in the same position. This makes me happy. So to enter my top 5 was my favorite and my last movie theater experience was The Invisible Man.
Yes.
Yes, that was...
Now we're getting into repeats.
And that's perfectly fine.
That's totally good. Totally good.
I fucking loved Invisible Man. I thought it was so brilliant. My only critique is not seeing enough of my new crush, Oliver Jackson Cohen. Yeah, Invisible Man was absolutely phenomenal. The paint can scene nearly pissed myself. The audience reaction, as Jacob was saying, was just there in the moment with everything. And a movie is really effective when everyone is cheering at the end. And it's not just like oh man, Captain America got the hammer. No, dude, when it's like, like it's understandable when it comes to like comic booky stuff because, that stuff is so ingrained in people. But when it's a new thing and people are cheering for the hero at the end of the movie, it's beautiful. And like it's still effective. It's got some of the most terrifying out of nowhere things. That reminds me a lot of The Entity. I know we've mentioned that a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it's just as effective and harrowing, but also I think even Lee Winnell set it up that way because he did a marathon of nothing but like 90s thrillers to go with the premiere and stuff. And it reminded me a lot of like those 90s thrillers, like Basic Instinct, Sleeping with the Enemy, all those movies that I grew up on that I was for some reason allowed to watch before horror, so those were kind of my like getting into horror movies. So yeah, I absolutely loved it.
Well, Fatal Attraction was an Oscar movie.
It was.
That's true. And yeah, John, didn't we see it together at Beyond Fest or the Egyptian Theater?
We did see it at the Egyptian. Yeah, we went to the pre-screening. Remember?
Oh yeah, that was a fun time.
I think you snuck in some food.
What?
No, Jacob would not do
I
that.
remember you eating something weird, and I was just like, "Bud, what are you doing?"
Jacob's a theater employee. He would never break the rules.
I think I was having a sandwich. Maybe I can't remember like February. That's like 10 years ago.
2020 has been the longest decade, huh?
Okay, Jacob, what is your number 5?
All right. Well, going into my top 5, I'm starting off with His House. This is a horror movie that premiered on Netflix. I'm a big fan of haunted house movies, and it's always interesting to see how people kind of play around with the genre. And this was a complete twist on it, and like really made it its own. Yeah, like it was just such an interesting cross between a haunted house story with such a foundation on real world trauma and events. It was just very well made. And also you got Matt Smith, the doctor, in a supporting role. So that was pretty cool.
My number 5 is The Dark and the Wicked, which is it's more of that Brian Bertino slow burn stuff that, like The Monster or The Strangers, but it's more supernatural than that. And speaking of holy shit moments, The Dark and the Wicked has a couple really good holy shit moments as well. It's just, it's dark and it's wicked. So it's not just a clever name. Short synopsis: this old man is dying, and his kids come back to his farm to basically be with him as he's dying. And then weird shit happens while they're there, and it gets paranormal and supernatural and occulty and all that other stuff. But yeah, The Dark and the Wicked. It's dark and wicked.
That movie sounds right up my alley. It comes to Shudder in January, so I guess I'll have to wait till then.
Move it to the top of the queue, because I think you will. I think it is right up your alley. All right, number 4, Korea.
Number 4, I'm gonna have to go with, for my number 4, one of John Waters' John Waters' favorite films of the year, Swallow. When I was thinking of my top 10s and where things are, one of the big influences for me was my reactions to it. Like, how much did it have? How much of a reaction I had to say, like, how effective was it on me? That film had me yelling at the TV, which I rarely do, but it had me yelling at the TV. No, take that out of your mouth. Take that out. Stop. Because it's just so effective. It's such a weird and so straightforward, but it reminds me why I love horror so much. Just seeing weird and unusual things, but also opening doors to other experiences that I don't have, and giving me a glimpse of that. And Swallow was very effective. It had a great score. The acting was superb. I never didn't feel uncomfortable, even when she wasn't swallowing things. Just like everything about like the relationship was just so uncomfortable.
Well, because also even when she's not swallowing stuff, there's like a marble in her stomach or something, or like a thumbtack. You're like,
yeah. And there's a lot of stuff like that, or just like, what's that battery doing to her? But even taking out like the whole swallow bits, it's just her relationship with her husband and with her in-laws, and just like all these other things are just in themselves are uncomfortable. So the entire time you can never find that position to sit right throughout it. You're just constantly having to move and squirm. So yeah, Swallow, one of my tops of the year.
Jacob, number 4.
My number 4, and again we're starting to get some crossover, was Brian Duffield's Spontaneous.
Yes, someone else loves Spontaneous too.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of what like Jonathan was talking about. That it's a very relatable story to millennials who, kind of have to grow up with the specter of this, just all this craziness with kind of overhead, like school shooting, climate change. Well, now we got a pandemic. Like it just came out at a real perfect time to kind of dwell on that. Because it just feels like it could be any other. It could be a rom-com just between these two high school students, but then you got people spontaneously combusting into balls of bloody goo. And it was as powerful as it was funny, but also tense, because this, like a lot of movies and stories pride themselves on like anybody could die, but in this one, anybody can die. Like they emphasize it quite a lot, and just it had some really heartwarming scenes, like just the ET scene, like really got to me in that it was so funny, but at the same time touching, and just it was very well written. Like it just felt like kind of the thematic movie of the year.
Spontaneous didn't make my list, but it has probably my favorite on-screen pairing of the year with Catherine Langford and Charlie Plummer, because there's just something about those two on screen together that is just, it just makes you feel good. I mean, their relationship is the core of the movie, and you're just like, oh, these two are so sweet. Please make it.
Yeah, they had such good chemistry. Like if they didn't have if they just had a little bit less, that film would not have worked. So like
it makes the movie. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And that's what Duffield told us when we had him on, when we had Brian on. He's like, oh yeah, I lucked out with that because I just half the movie was in the casting.
Yeah,
that's very true.
All right, my number 4, and remember, no fighting, positive only. And this is where there's going to be no crossover. My number 4 is Antebellum. And I just say, I know that people disagree with me, but I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was genius. I'm also a huge fan of Shyamalan's movies. This movie Shyamalan, actually. It in fact, I mean, enough time has passed so I can say it kind of rips off the ending of one of Shyamalan's movies. It kind of rips off the twist. But I, for one, maybe I'm a simp, but I did not see that ending coming, and it just left me with my jaw on the ground, and I was like, holy shit. I was standing up in my living room applauding the end of that movie. And yeah, I thought it was brilliant, and the world disagrees with me, but I don't care.
It's all personal opinions, man. Everyone's entitled to their opinions. That's fine.
Could have been worse. I could have put Freaky on my list, right?
No, you could have done worse and put I can't think of a film that pissed me off more than Antebellum this year, so all
right, let's move on to number 3. Korea, what's your 3?
Top 3. Boom, top 3. So my number 3 was from one of the best double features I've ever been to. It happened at Beyond Fest. But the main one for it was Possessor. They paired it up with John Frankenheimer's Seconds. Awesome double feature. But Possessor Uncut, absolutely phenomenal. And I actually recently watched Antiviral, and so it's really cool seeing Brandon Cronenberg coming into his own, doing his own thing. Yeah, you can definitely see there's a lot of influence of his father, but like I really liked how it's still his own voice. He did his own take on, and there's a lot of body horror, but there's even more. It's one of those movies that gets you questioning a lot of stuff, like what is personality, what is human consciousness, what is soul, stuff like that. When movies have like that fun horror and action, but also get you thinking about big questions, that really tickles my fancy. And Possessor was just like, not only had all this existential crisis throughout it, but it also had some really gnarly scenes and some phenomenal acting. Possessor was such a ballpark like home run for a sophomore feature. I loved it. Yeah, I bought the 4K. I had to.
Cool, Jacob, you're number 3.
All right, for my number 3, and like John was saying, we're going back to Beyond Fest on this. Psycho Gorman, aka PG. Which definitely one of my all-time favorites this year. It's from Stephen Kostansky, who was a part of Astron 6 and also did The Void and Leprechaun Returns. So you just know it's going to be a special effects extravaganza. It's basically about these siblings, this brother and sister who are like playing in their backyard one day, and they accidentally uncover this ancient seal to this legendary cosmic evil force who immediately plans to destroy the world, except they control the jewel that contains his power, so he has to do everything they say. So it's basically E.T. if E.T. was like one of the Cenobites. Because it's like this horrible monster humanoid who has all these crazy powers that can destroy you or like give you a fate worse than death or like turn you into a zombie. But like that, but now he has to follow the orders of these two kids. So it leads to all sorts of bloody shenanigans, I guess. And it still kind of has a lot of heart, kind of has the ET thing where PG starts to become a part of the family. And I don't know, it's just such an out there concept. I can't help but love it. It was just so much fun and just looked really cool. Like, I'm just very excited for it to just rip people's faces off next month.
And their hearts.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing too. I am very proud that my review made the poster for Psycho Gorman, which I called heartwarming and heart ripping, which I feel really sums the movie up.
Yeah, that movie just looked like had your name written all over it.
Oh yeah, it was made for me. I
was like, man, dude, they just really are going after Jacob with that one.
Yeah, I'm a target audience. What can I say?
My number 3 is Swallow, which we've already talked about a little bit. Like Korea said, he said it best. It's just so effective. You're sitting there, yelling at the screen, don't. Oh, you did, like she's holding this thumbtack in front of her mouth and you're like, oh, and Haley Bennett has a great performance in it. Second only to Aubrey Plaza in Black Bear, which, probably would have made my list if it was more of a traditional horror movie. But anyway, yeah, Swallow, terrific. Another IFC Films gem from this year.
Yes. Thank you, IFC, for keeping us safe in our cars at the drive-ins.
And thank you for not pushing all your movies into next year. You released them so we had cool stuff to watch.
Yeah.
Let's move on to number 2. We're getting up there.
The Deuce.
Drop your deuce.
Speaking of deuce... My number 2 is The Platform. Again, thinking of effectiveness, this film is not like horror in that there's a spooky guy. No, it's disgusting. It's a disgusting film. There is so many, like when I think about Platform, yes, the not so subtle but still perfectly executed metaphors on classism and class relations is so on point. But the eating scenes, man, oh my. I am someone that cannot stand when someone's chewing with their mouth open, and that movie not only has so much of that, but they zoom in, they get in close. It got under my skin, and and I thought it was so effective and so like just the concept, how it plays out. It was so well done. Netflix killed it in releasing that, and that one it stuck with me for days. Like, again, I like movies that get me thinking and stuff, so that one had me, it stayed with me for a good week or two after. So yeah, Platform, loved it.
Jacob, number 2.
Okay, at my number 2, and again we're going into crossing over here as we get to the top 3. Possessor, like that was just such a powerful movie. And Brandon Cronenberg really keeping the tradition alive of body horror. And just had so much to say while saying so little, because there's so many quiet scenes, but they really hit. And also Andrea Riseborough, her performance should be lauded, because the whole thing is like she's a character, she's an actress playing a character who is also an actress in a way, because she has to impersonate her targets perfectly. And there's a lot of scenes of her like talking into the mirror to try and kind of either retain her own identity or get into the persona of the people she's trying to impersonate to commit these assassinations. And it has a lot to say about, kind of technology and capitalism and where society is going. And yeah, it's such a powerful movie. It really sticks with you long after. Oh, and also Jennifer Jason Leigh was real good in it too.
Oh man, was she ever?
Oh yeah,
she's always great though. I love Jennifer Jason.
Exactly. That's why I have to say.
My number 2 is something we've talked about already: The Invisible Man.
Yeah.
I kind of think that Korea and I have different ideas of what the holy shit moment was, because mine, without spoiling anything, was the restaurant scene.
Yes, that was what I was thinking too.
Yeah, not the paint can scene, the restaurant scene. When you remember it, you'll freak out, Korea.
Yeah, just remember how a bunch of people freaked out in the audience.
Yeah.
Like,
people freaked out for that whole movie, though. I agree with you. It is a great theater experience. So it's kind of a shame that was one of the first movies that Universal pushed to theater at home, along with The Hunt and Emma back in March. Yeah. And it's kind of a shame that not as much of a shame as The Hunt, because that poor movie already got pushed back once. But yeah, Invisible Man, it is like you say, you gasp, you cheer, you cry. I mean, it's a theater audience movie.
Yeah.
And it's such a great analogy for not just like gaslighting, but for domestic violence in general. Like, no one believes that people think that Elizabeth Moss's character is crazy for all these accusations because they don't see it. And it's like, that just hits you. You're like, oh my God, this is what people don't believe, these women. And this is, it's kind of a popcorn movie, but it says so much.
And they really did their research with that, because I used to teach women and children safety classes. So I got involved with a lot of people who went through those experiences, and the language, how people talked, the words they used, everything was just so spot on. It really was. Yeah, it was a bit flashbacky, traumatizing a bit, where it's just like, this is very real. Like it.
I have a friend who, I tell her, I'm like, this movie is amazing, but knowing some of the things from her past, I'm like, it's going to trigger you. So watch it when you're ready, but it's an incredible movie. Just know, this is going to trigger you.
Yeah.
And it will. The Invisible Man may trigger survivors because it's what it's about. All right, here we go. When I say number, you say one. Number.
One.
Number.
One.
Can you tell we didn't rehearse that?
You really think?
Kriya, what is your number one?
Number one. Oh, man. I got to say, this was tough. I watched a lot of films, especially in my catching up, that were so good. It was just trying to fit them into the confines of horror. They did not fit. So when I think about one of my favorite things about horror is getting that glimpse, like I said earlier, getting that glimpse into experiences that I don't have, that I can't have because of who I am and where I come from. And so when I watched His House this year, it not only was an incredible ghost story that hit all the proper and right notes of a good ghost story, but it covered and effectively showed what's happening with, or what is still happening with refugees from Sudan coming over, and everything about it was just so heartbreaking and had some genuinely very creepy moments. Oh my God, just like the part where the wife is sitting and like she just looks over and all the eyes are coming out of the holes in the wall. Like that sticks with me, man. That's one of those things that like you're you shut off the TV, you're going to bed, and you look into the dark corner of the room and you're like, fuck, are there eyes over there? It's just such a well-made and such a great ghost story. It's not only my top film of the year, it's definitely one of my favorite ghost stories. It's up there with The Changeling. For me, I understand other people might not love it as much, but yeah, I thought that one was really good and very effective.
Cool. Jacob, number one.
Yeah, it's always hard to pick a number one movie, and I did feel kind of pressured to choose one of the more prestigious movies, but damn it, I had to pick the one for me, and of course that movie was going to be Underwater.
I'm surprised it wasn't Underwater 10 times.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would have done it if I could have. I just, I would have run out of things to talk about after a while. But yeah, no, it was, I had to pick something theatrically because, I did get to see a few movies before the pandemic shut everything down, and a lot of those experiences were amazing. And I actually got to see Underwater premiere in Los Angeles at the Alamo Drafthouse with the cast and crew in person. So, just with the way things are, it's a very fond memory now. But yeah, it's a pure horror movie. It's distilled like what James was talking about. It's also like a disaster movie just because like you go in a few minutes and like right off the bat, they hit the ground running with just the whole undersea station falling apart and explosions and everything starting to compress. And then you meet the cast of characters and then the monsters show up and, oh man, and again, we're talking theatrical experiences. Like I saw it in a packed house. So like when that first kind of creature is kind of in the background, as people gasped and freaked the hell out. And, that's good horror right there. That's, getting a visceral reaction from the audience. And also Kristen Stewart is amazing and she should have more lead roles in horror movies because she rocks. She got to do kind of a Ripley thing in this movie. Like she's flawed, but she takes initiative and, she gets to fight some undersea monsters, and the effects are just astounding. Like, they talked about it like it was. I believe the term is dry for wet. So like they weren't actually underwater, but they did have to wear like these big, bulky, like spacesuits and just kind of like pretend to be underwater, which, just like I couldn't really tell the difference either way. But like the big one though was like toward the end, like the climax, there is just an absolute jaw dropper that when I saw, I let out an audible, what the fuck, at the reveal of like what this was all building to, because like this isn't just an underwater disaster movie. This isn't just an underwater monster movie. This is, hopefully without spoiling too much, it's a cosmic horror movie.
It's very Lovecraftian. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it just kind of went that extra mile of like having layers to it. And also another big shout out to Brian Duffield, who co-wrote the script and like I actually even talked with the director, William Eubank, because I was tweeting so much about he just saw I was like a big fan. So it was kind of cool talking about him, talking about the movie with him about that. And yeah, I saw it 4 times in theaters, and I've watched it a whole bunch when I got it on Blu-ray. So it's like each time you watch it, you kind of pick up on new stuff, or it's just kind of fun to, kind of revisit it just because it's, like it's a thrill ride. It's just something you want to put on when you want to get a little scared, want a little adrenaline. It's a good time movie, and I would love to see it again in theaters someday if I could.
In IMAX, that would be a fun.
Oh
IMAX,
yes,
yeah.
Oh, I would love to see it in IMAX.
My number one, I keep track over the course of the year. I kind of start a list because so I don't forget anything. So my number one has actually been my number one for more than half the year. And we've already talked about it a little bit. It's Sputnik.
Yeah.
Sputnik, another IFC saving the year.
Tell us more.
Sputnik is it's basically Arrival meets Alien. It also is kind of, if you've seen Life, not to spoil the ending of Life, but this seems to pick up right where Life could have left off if the Life people were Russian, if the if the survivor of Life was,
if they were cosmonauts instead of astronauts. I just learned that difference recently.
What is the difference? Isn't the difference that Russian versus American?
Yeah. So
Okay.
Americans call them astronauts. Russians call them cosmonauts.
But it's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, they're space people.
But now it's the thing about Sputnik is the perceived antagonist is shifting the entire time. You're like, okay, wait, is it this guy who came back that they're investigating? Is it the colonel who's trying to, hide all this stuff? Is it the monster itself? It's, there's only one character who the whole time is a good person, it is a protagonist, and the others shift and morph. So it's not just, it is a creature feature, but it's a really smart one.
Yeah.
So yeah, Sputnik is my number one. Let's talk some honorable mentions. I'll tell you a couple of mine that didn't make the cut, mainly because they're not traditional horror movies, and I get ripped to shreds by the internet every time I do a fringe horror movie list. So I left them off. One, we've already mentioned, Black Bear. Has my favorite female performance of the year with Aubrey Plaza, but it's just one of those unsettling creep movies, but it's not necessarily horror. And the other one, which comes out, it will have been out for a couple days by the time this posts, Promising Young Woman, which is not really horror at all, but it's like a revenge movie. It's kind of like Jawbreaker meets Kill Bill. It's a dark comedy revenge movie about a woman who basically had a traumatic event in her past, and she's taken it out on every man. She goes to bars, pretends to be drunk, and when men pick her up and take her home, thinking they're going to have sex with her, she all of a sudden doesn't let them. Yeah, and that's all I'll say. But anyway, Promising Young Woman is it's terrific as well. What about you guys? Honorable mentions.
2 that I want to mention that didn't quite make the cut were Scare Package and The Pale Door by Aaron Kuntz and Cameron Burns. Scare Package was a pretty funny horror comedy anthology movie with like a bunch of different segments by a bunch of different directors and writers and people, and just and also one of the mother of all cameos in a horror movie this year. The Pale Door was a Joe R. Lansdale adaptation, so it's kind of a Weird West horror western, which are so good but so rare, that subgenre with outlaws versus witches in a like ghost town. So those were a lot of fun. Both of them are on Shudder now, so if you haven't seen them, definitely would recommend them. And I don't know. Like, I also saw some other cool stuff on the festival circuit that'll be coming out soon, but I didn't want to put too many on because they're not as publicly available. But one I want to mention that I had a lot of fun with was this one called Bloody Hell, which is basically about this American ex-con who travels to Europe and he gets kidnapped by this weird Wes Anderson style family, and it's just so bonkers and bloody. I just can't help but love it, and I'm very excited for when it gets a mainstream release.
Cool. Korea, what are your honorable mentions? I know you've got a bunch.
Yeah, I have to agree with Jacob, because for me, my favorite movie of the year, and it was my number one until I thought about it, was Saint Maud. But that one technically isn't getting a release here till next year, so I wanted to give movies that came out in 2020 a shot. So that one's gonna be the one to beat next year. But Saint Maud was incredible. Yeah, it was just such a visceral and just anxiety inducing experience.
I can't wait until they give us screeners for that, because I've had that rug pulled out from under me 3 times already. I'm like, come on, just show it to me.
I can't wait for everyone to see this movie because I want to talk about it so much, but I don't want to spoil anything. It's so fucking good. I also want to give shout out to She Dies Tomorrow. Another one of those that gets you thinking, like, as the whole plot of that is this woman thinks that she's going to die tomorrow. And when she says to someone, I'm going to die tomorrow, they then get infected with the I'm going to die tomorrow thing as well. And so you see these uncomfortable positions where it's people with their loved ones, and you want to tell your loved one I'm going to die tomorrow because you want to let them know, but they don't know that that's going to cause them to die the next day as well. And so it creates that moral conundrum, and it's very effective. Also, Scare Me is one of the best horror comedies I've seen in a very long time. Just 2 people telling ghost stories back to back, and like the sound work and the acting just sell it. Very effective and very fun movie. And then lastly, I want to give a shout out to Anything for Jackson, just because that director has mostly made cheap or super low budget Christmas movies, and then all of a sudden makes this like very out there horror film. The acting kind of comes off with that kind of like low budget Christmassy hokiness, but it also has some of the most fucked up imagery I've seen this year. It's about this older couple that are Satanists, and they're trying to bring back their grandson by putting his soul into the unborn child of this pregnant woman. So they kidnap her. And there's all this weird stuff because once they open up the portal or like break through the walls to purgatory to bring back their grandson, all these ghosts are coming out. So there's a lot of fucked up imagery and people like committing suicide around them. There's one part where a character shoots himself in the face in front of them, and then her ghost keeps coming back and doing it. So there's like a point where her ghost comes back and just basically goes, hey guys, boom. And then like it cuts to the next morning and this character comes in and he's like, hey guys. And then that ghost just appears and blows her head off again. And they're like, yeah, she's been doing that all night. And I'm just like, oh, that's rough. Also, there's a flossing scene, leaving it at that because that grossed me out. But yeah, a lot of really great stuff that unfortunately you can only fit so many titles in the top 10.
Yeah. I got another shout out I want to do real quick. Benson and Moorhead Synchronic with Anthony Mackie and Jamie Dornan. Like that was a good one. Just I wasn't sure if it really counted because I mean it's got some horror elements to it definitely, but I felt like it was more of a sci-fi movie. But I mean it was really good, and it just had such a weird concept, like this drug that allows you to travel through time, and it did make for some outstanding set pieces, like one where like he ends up in the Ice Age, one where he's like in a little colonial village. So it just had a lot going on, and it was another fun Beyond Fest screen.
These are our top 10s and our runners up. So let us know yours, because I'm sure, it seemed like horror movies are the only thing that consistently released this year, except for Saint Maud. So,
and Green Knight.
Yeah, Green Knight got pushed to stupid A24. Not really. I love A24, but release some movies, guys.
Hey, at least I got to see Saint Maud. That's all that matters, really.
It still kills me that there's a group of critics who have seen A Quiet Place Part 2, and I'm not one of them. Anyway, let's get out of here. Let us know what your favorite movies are. If you disagree with me for including Antebellum at number 4, let me have it. I've been railed on for worse on the internet. Let's get out of here. Our theme music is by Restless Spirit, so rock with them. Our artwork is Chris Fisher, so go and appreciate his art. You can find us at the Eye on Horror Facebook page, the iHorror Facebook page, the Eye on Horror Twitter, the Eye on Horror. I don't even know what else we have. We have an Instagram. We have
Bumble account.
I don't know. We have all sorts of social media, or you can find us at iHorror.com, where you can also read about a bunch of this stuff. Jacob's interviews are coming out. His pull quote is from iHorror.com. So yeah. Yay, iHorror. Right. We might take a couple weeks, but I believe that our first episode back is going to have a guest you won't want to miss. I hope I'm not teasing this prematurely.
Oh, we're not missing a beat, people. We're coming right back. See you in 2 weeks, motherfuckers. We take breaks. We already had our break.
What? I didn't have a break. Anyway, unless something really goes wrong, we're going to have some good guests.
Yeah.
Even if something does go wrong, we'll have some good guests. But the first one we have lined up, we're really looking forward to.
Oh, yeah. Cool. It's going to be great.
We'll see you. I'm gonna be that kid in elementary school. We'll see you next year. So for me, James J. Edwards.
I'm Jacob Davison.
And I'm Jonathan Correa.
Keep your eye on horror.